everybody was generally very happy to have a new style of the franchise. We delivered what we agreed to deliver.
The success of a movie doesn't really happen to you. You just sort of get, someone tells you about it, or you are aware of it. Your whole experience with the film is really finished when you hand it in.
What I loved is being able to create a fantasy world that there was no holds barred.
Everything has to be designed, all the way down to the props, the bat suit, the Batmobile.
Chance to build a Batmobile, you know, it's pretty rare to have an opportunity like that, so we jumped in.
In Batman, you want to take people to a world that they don't go to every day.
The fun of any of these is that you're doing something that nobody has done before in the way that you're going to do it.
Production design is crucial to every movie. It really is. Even the ones where you don't think so. Because it's actually telling you the story. I mean, the place, the day, the weather, the storefront, the restaurant, the apartment is telling you so much information. Your eye gets so much information. It's as important as casting. It just should be invisible. In a movie like Batman, it shouldn't be invisible. I thought Barbara Ling would be brilliant for Batman. She's an extraordinary talent, and she has great imagination and great style, and she's just a force. And I thought Gotham City would be designed by a force.
My job is really to bring the visual elements to create an overall world so that by the time costume starts and other departments, there is a look, there is a coloration to it, and there's research and imagery and drawings to be able to give to the other departments.
It's funny, there's times when Barbara is so busy you almost have to take a number to see her, because she has her hands in every department, in every facet of the film, which is where she should be with it, bringing her creativity to it.
From the very beginning, when he first asked me to do this with him, he said, let's make this completely our own thing. This was really Joel's Batman, and it was, you know, his vision of what it should be. And it's, you know, he was just said, there's nothing that we need to borrow from. The studio said, absolutely, it's Joel's, and it gave us a clean slate to be able to invent from the Batmobile up everything we wanted to.
My only suggestion to her was that we do faces and figures in the city so that the city had a personality. I didn't want it to be just monolithic or Gothic structures. I wanted it to have some life to it.
I feel we became very organic in the nature of the human anatomy. You know, bringing that to the table. Like a lot of the buildings you'll see in Gotham City reflect the large statures of men and women.
I think, in a way, when you ever think really of Gotham, obviously, when the comics were first being written, was for New York. And, you know, because New York in the 30s was giant and grand. So all the sense of scale of the sets, the proportions of the buildings, statues are all heightened to be bigger than man. The idea was to keep it very much a sense you don't know where you are, you don't know, it could be any time period, it could be. I mean, that's very much what Gotham to me is about, is that you can never really pinpoint it. The idea, too, is that you're staying within mainly night, so neon becomes a very important element, and creating many influences of neon. The beautiful neon signs of the 20s and 30s that would have really taken, you know, the look that you see kind of 42nd Street in old black and white photographs to what Tokyo has now, which is wild graphics on giant proportions.
The Batcave was was very modernized. You know, it had the hydraulics so the car could come up. It was still a cave with bats in it, but it was much larger.
I think we took the hangar where the Spruce Goose is, and that's where we built the interior of the Bat Cave. And there's so many elements that are going on within that one set. Not only do you just have the look of it, you know, the underground cave look, you have the positioning of the Batmobile, you have the turntable that it sits on, you have the moat that's around it.
We just took things that you've seen before, which was, there's always been a screen in the Batcave for Batman to sort of monitor what's going on. We just made it larger. Also, technology was changing so dramatically. You know, this was 1994. So we took advantage of that.
The Batcave evolved on the same level of the first time. First of all, we wanted to really see a full Batcave because they'd played it smaller or just more down, you know, very few scenes in the Batcave in the original two. And we wanted to do big scenes, so we went, you know, much larger.
The Riddler is, Edward Nygma is this little nerd who starts out in a very narrow apartment, even with Clapper and his bicycle, and then he ultimately wants to run the world. So his lair at the end has all been created very recently, so it's very high-tech, lots of, you know, neon and steel and glass, and it's very from the mind of an insane genius. The Riddler also is a jokester, and because he's always worn that really screaming green with the question marks on it, that's sort of, you start from there. You start from the green and sort of, you know, move out from there.
He's an incredible challenge, the Riddler, because, you know, we knew what we were starting him in, but then, you know, what is his world? And it evolved from like a little power plant, but then you had to have a core, and then this kind of globe, and then, you know, it evolved and evolved to become this kind of mad world of his. And of course, you know, I can't tell you how many question marks were made to before the ultimate question mark.
I literally every day would walk on the set and just my jaw would drop to the ground. It was just amazing, you know. And that's the exciting thing about Batman, about this movie, you know, genre or whatever. It's big. I mean, it's like the best of every department coming together.
I simply love what you've done with this place. Heavy metal meets house and garden. Beautiful.
The fun of Harvey Two-Face is that he's a schizophrenic person, so, you know, we designed an environment that was half and half. And he even had 2 girlfriends.
That became, you know, quite a challenge to figure out how to kind of cut the room or cut everything in half so that you have the bit of his world on either side of it. And, you know, we went through a lot of progressions of, like, you know, how strange and gnarly this side of a couch could be to the normal side of the couch. He had such a definitive, I mean, in a way, when you're looking at somebody and they say, good, half is good and half is bad, you know, you have a much more definitive line to kind of go after.
The great thing about Joel is he gave us a vision, you know, in terms as the team, you know, and the team was Barbara Ling, Tim Flattery, and Charlie and I, and a couple of our guys who were really ingenious designers as far as the vehicles went. The kind of process that we brought to the project was based on, you know, what you would do in a design studio. So we had access to technology that at that time was pretty cutting edge to General Motors. We worked with Barbara directly for about probably a 6-week period, developing 5 different concepts. There wasn't a lot of excitement with those 5 models, and Joel just wasn't feeling good about it, so he sent us back to start over again. I don't think he felt like
something spectacularly different, which was interesting for me because I had worked on the original 5 models.
The Batmobile in Batman Forever was the inspiration of that was really Giger. You know, Joel was very loved the idea of it being something more organic.
He was inspired by a leather fetish magazine, of all places.
That's probably going to get cut, but it was really organic, really animal-driven. It wasn't automotive.
Yeah, he wanted it to feel like it was a living, breathing entity, not necessarily a car. We showed it to him, and he loved it.
It was a multi-layered vehicle. It's 3 principal layers of vehicle, one on top of the other. And what we did is a clay model, full-size clay model, and modeled each level, made a mold, and then modeled on top of that the next level, made molds of that, and worked to the 3rd level, and then finally had the sets of tooling. So we actually, in volume, did 3 cars to make one.
We actually did 2. There was a stunt car and a hero car. It has to be fast. It's a Batmobile, and we used a high-performance V8 engine that's a racing motor, so it had plenty of horsepower. Steering wasn't always a big issue, although there are times when it has to do stunts, and that's why we built 2 cars. One that's designed specifically, doesn't have an interior, it has a different roll cage, to be used in the stunt. Ours, I believe that car, the 2 of them completed, probably had about 8,000 man-hours on it. And it represented about 30 different guys of different trades, different skills, to get it done.
It was such a fast schedule, and the car was so complex, no one knew what it looked like until the day we put it together, which was a couple days before filming. So I started out, brown hair, now it's more gray, and that happened pretty much in about 6 months.
It was very much what Joel wanted to make, was, a film that just kept moving, had an exciting energy of its own that just kept, and it did.
Everything good is hard. And I think you have to enjoy what you do, and I do, and I did.
It's everything. They're just choices to hopefully entertain you. There's no, deep, dark intention except to entertain. It's to make as interesting and entertaining a Batman movie as you can.
I love the science of the make-believe. I'm very happy to do anything that's not normal.
Spank me. We had the most amazing group of technical people you could probably assemble under one roof.
We started slapping that stuff on, and all of a sudden, things started happening, and the next thing you know, the freaking character was born.
Half your face is purple, half of it's made out of latex. It may look just exactly like you, but it becomes an instrument of illusion.
I think Joel wanted these films to be lighthearted and more like the comic book, and very colorful and very upbeat and very broad, which was a totally different approach than Tim had.
I think what the studio was looking for was something maybe a bit more, almost like MTV-like in a way, if that makes sense to you. Something maybe a little edgier, a little more hip and interesting, so that you might draw a younger audience into it. When Joel came in, and he seemed to have a feeling for how to do that.
Joel is very flamboyant himself and is very much into the production design end of it, the costume design. He's done all these things himself besides being a director. So he's really in tune with all the artistic flair of a film. So he's a really good director to work with in that he allows you to get crazy and do wild things and be, just off the wall.
Bob Ringwood was the designer. He did the illustrations and worked with a couple of the illustrators upstairs and gave us a really good idea of what he wanted it to look like. We just had to make that, interpret it into a 3D. Dave Murch was from England, was on the other show, and he dresses, so he has the whole mindset of how is this going to work as dressing on a daily basis, how is this going to work on a stunt guy, and I'm more of an engineer.
Everyone wants the cape to articulate. They want to see it blowing in the breeze. Everyone says, how do we make the suit with the cape blow in the breeze? And that's very difficult to do that with flat latex. You'd have to have more than a fan to do that.
We took what had been done for the original one and looked at it. It was originally a corset that was underneath a really hard foam suit. and we wanted to make something sleeker and something closer fitting to the body, and also something that where the hood came down and integrated into the cape, so you couldn't really see where it ended and disappeared. It was a pretty big leap from to the Val Kilmer from the original Michael Keaton costume. We also engineered a bunch of different kinds of costumes, like one for sitting in the car so that he didn't have to wear everything to just do the close-ups. We put ventilation in the back of the suits if the back part wasn't going to be seen, so that he could be cooler. And then we had to do boots with lead plates in the soles so that the feet would sink when they were in the water, because otherwise they just bob like a cork.
Nobody enjoyed wearing them, quite honestly, because what's to enjoy, and what actor really wants to be covered up completely and only show his eyes and his mouth? Nobody that I know.
Val Kilmer had a much more statuesque figure. That was his biggest contribution for us. It just was much easier for someone who was over 6 foot and thinner to make the suit look good, to be statuesque.
I knew it was like something, and it just wouldn't come to me what it was. And one day I realized, in one magical moment, it's like being old. No one talks back to you when you're talking. You can't hear. You can't go to the bathroom. It's a long list of things that you can't do anymore when you're in the bat suit. But it looks good.
I need a name. Batboy, Nightwing. I don't know. What do you think? What's a good sidekick name?
The Robin costume is based on Errol Flynn's costume for Robin and Sherwood, which is the year Robin was introduced into the comics. But then to take that rather show-busy, rather garish costume in primary colours and to render it in that beautiful metallic, luminescent finish in those muted tones was just stunning.
It was basically the same technology. The only thing that's really different is the size of the suit and the color when it was painted at the end. So it went through the same track, through the same people, through the same hands. It was just, on different body forms.
Joel really wanted the Robin character to be a heartthrob for the young teenage girls, obviously. So Chris was not really used to being kind of like as edgy as we wanted to make him. So, I had him get his ear pierced so he wore an earring because we didn't want to put a phony one on him because it just looked too cheesy. I had him with a little bit of, dark eye makeup on, and we gave him that really cute, edgy little haircut. And I think he came off really cute, and I think he was quite a heartthrob, with his black leather jacket and the whole, shebang.
Let me try. Climb up the desk. Reach way back. Search yourself. Ow!
Jim Carrey's Riddler costume was kind of fun. We had a big flat cutout shaped body that we would shove into the leotard and with all the question marks marked on it. And then put that whole thing through the heat press machine so all the question marks would come out in the same place. Because we had lots of them. There were maybe like 50 of these green tights to get them all to come out in the exact same place.
I went through at least 100 canes. Just snapping them in two, breaking them over my shoulder, breaking them on my elbow. And I just walked around with it for ages, breaking cabinets and taking chunks out of the ceiling and just everywhere. And they're heavy. They're monster things. It's like a shillelagh.
Jim Carrey's character went through quite a transition during the film, and his makeup, Cheryl Patak, did a wonderful job of designing all these different looks for him as he transformed. When he got into the actual painted character with the orange hair, I pretty much designed that look for Jim, and she and I worked it out, and I explained to her what I would like to see, and we kind of worked on that together.
Has anybody ever told you you have a serious impulse control problem?
We were very lucky that Jim wanted to play this role. His makeup is very complex. The wig, the mask, the suit. He couldn't eat a thing the whole movie. He had to work out and watch because the Riddler suit is the kind of suit that you can't gain 1 ounce.
There was a lot of experimenting visually with the Riddler face, with my complexion color, with everything, and we finally settled on David Bowie and Spiders from Mars.
I'm Bruce Wayne, miss.
Oh, you can call me anything you want.
When Two-Face's girlfriends worked, they really wanted myself and Cheryl to do them. And that meant the girls coming in at 4 in the morning, and they would come in at 4 in the morning. We would do their makeup, and then they would sit around while we did the guys, which was another 2 hours or something. So that kind of made for real short turnarounds, and they were pretty gracious about it. I mean, we would have fun. We'd put on the music at 4 in the morning and sing and dance and try to be awake. And
my waist was shrunken down to 18 inches. And this was before I had babies, and I was in like 6-inch heels the whole time. So I had to use a slant board to, like, you know, take a break. Slant board is a piece of wood that they used a lot in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s when they made those movies with big costumes, so the actress could relax without like bending or taking her shoes off.
Let's see what justice has in store for you.
I contacted Rick Baker, who is a brilliant special effects makeup wizard, and I said, Rick, what do you think about Tommy Lee to play Harvey Two-Face? He said, that's perfect. So Rick got a picture of Tommy Lee, did all the work in the computer on them. In those days it was probably Noah's Ark computer graphics, but it looked brilliant.
The Two-Face makeup was basically a prosthetic that just was a weird kind of psychedelic burn makeup that covered half of Tommy Lee Jones's face, and then of course his wardrobe was divided in half too, for his split personality.
That makeup was designed by Rick Baker. I applied it every day. You know, Rick brought the makeup to me. It showed me how it was going to be. We did a little tweaking in it, simply because when we first see Harvey's Two-Face character, he's shot in a lot of red light, so he kind of just disappeared.
We built this makeup job, and we did it building block by building block by building block. The novelty was meant to be experienced by the audience, not by me.
The first piece was, the headpiece was glued onto a vacuform plate, which we actually glued Tommy's hair down, and then the actual glue that we used in his hair, which is called gaffquat, stuck the helmet piece on. And from there, we glued all the other pieces onto it. I think there was 5 pieces.
The part of Harvey Two-Face started out taking 4 hours for makeup, and we smoothed the process out over time that ultimately wound up taking about 2 hours.
You know, it's not going to be an hour makeup job this time, Tommy. It's going to be a long time. And he goes, that's all right, I can be bought. And I said, okay, I'm going to remember that.
Who the hell are you?
I'm Batman.
There were so many other makeups in this movie, and so many big gang scenes and different groups of people. We had a scene in an alley where Robin steals a car and takes off and winds up in this alley that's all day glow. Well, all the characters that come out of these walls and the rooms and the windows and down the things all had to be done in these really wild day glow paint makeups. Well, a lot of the stuff didn't show up unless it was in black light, like the alley was lit. So what we did was we had black lights installed in the makeup trailer, and we would turn them on and off so we could read the makeups to see what we were doing. So that was kind of a fun and new thing that I had never done before, and I don't know that anybody else working on the film had ever done it either.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the greatest show on earth.
I just thought, wow, this is going to be wonderful. I mean, circus, this everything. Guys in full body makeup, gold drummers, and we had to develop all these different types of body makeup so that they wouldn't get sick because they were painted from head to toe, and people were having problems because they were covered in gold dust, and we had a lot of crazy things going on. We had so many people working to get all those characters ready, all the clowns and the drummers and my gosh, I don't even remember all the characters we had, but we were quite busy for that circus scene.
Why can't you just die?
I think at one point there were 146 people just in the costume department that were making all kinds of different things. You would throw an idea out there, throw a concept out to these people, and you would get any number of different ways that you could have what you want thrown back at you, which is really unheard of anymore.
Bob Ringwood is the best designer to work for. He is incredibly creative. He knows how to pick people who know how to do what they do, and he gives them an idea, says, this is what I want. He gives you a really specific illustration that you know exactly what the costume is supposed to look like, and he comes and talks to you, and then he goes away and lets you do it.
I really feel that entertainment and lighthearted, fun movies are a lot more enjoyable, obviously, to go see than, a heavy drama. I sort of think that's sort of the kid in me is just perpetual. My mother used to always say to me, my poor baby thinks every day is Halloween, and I think she was right, because it seems like almost every film I do involves doing something make-believe, which, that's not bad.
Guys that had certain specialties would come in and do certain things, and I was pretty much just the general all-around double. If it was something that I could do, I would do it. If it was really an intricate fight scene, really martial arty, they would get somebody that was top-notch at that, so that every piece, every sequence looked as good as it possibly could. What happens is the stunt riggers who are actually running the descender device, they'll rehearse it with sandbags that are equal to my weight, with no glass, no water in the fountain, no people around. That would happen days or a week before. And then I get into it without the bat costume and without any of the production crew around whatsoever, and we rehearse that drop. But it's tested and retested and so dialed in. My responsibility is to, have the form of Batman and not fall over when I get to the fountain.
That's actually the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. We couldn't afford to build that set, so we built a full piece, and he jumped down. That's him, and he jumps down right into the fountain.
What I remember most, I'll take you how it was in my head. I'm up above the fountain. There's a big piece of glass mirror underneath me that I can't put my feet on, and I'm suspended in cables. And there's effects men up there around me while they're getting it all set, and then they pull away. They're all on condors. They go away, and they roll cameras right away. They know it's a very urgent thing, and then I hear the countdown, and as soon as I hear go, it's a 3, 2, 1, go, and on go, I slam my feet through the glass as hard as I can, but I don't feel it because the effects guys are also breaking the glass with an electronic charge.
Keith, you stud!
On down I go, and it just was as smooth as could be, and on to the next shot, basically.
Batman!
Whole new setup. Mini tramp goes into the fountain, pad out on the floor. The next piece of that was me standing on the mini tramp. When I stand on it, the top of the trampoline or the trampoline bed would actually go into the water a tiny bit. So then when I bounced on it the one time to bounce, it got much deeper into the water, and as I flip out, it's just a nice effect of pulling the water with me. That didn't hinder me at all whatsoever. It was that dang bat cape that was the hindrance. The capes were very different from stunt to stunt. That cape was so heavy to try and get that action, and the guys that worked on the capes did amazing jobs, just to do whatever they could to lighten it and get stiffening rods in the right places so the cape could get out of the way, or so much monofilament work done to hold the cape down when you're upside down. I remember doing 3, 4, maybe 5 takes of complete failure trying to figure out what I needed to do, and this was all internal stuff. And luckily it wasn't a tough reset, but it did get down to Joel saying, well, if it doesn't work this time, we really should move on, because, we have it good enough, but it was pretty weak. And then finally on the last take, that's the one that's in the movie. It went so well, and very fortunate that it did.
Then Alex, a second stuntman, takes over and does the martial arts, but it really looks like Batman crashes through the roof, lands on the fountain, flips backwards, and does martial arts, and that was exciting. I'd never done anything like that because I'd never made an action film, and I was quite proud of that. they were brilliant. All the stunt people work so hard, and those costumes and that makeup are very, very difficult to work in.
Unfortunately, as stuntmen, if we try too hard to match our actor, everybody laughs at us except the director. I mean, you get teased about that constantly, and it's such a curse because you're trying so hard to be the actor Val Kilmer, and you get labeled as a person that can't act because you're trying to impersonate somebody instead of just do it how you would do it. I mean, the more you can get the mannerisms down and just be exactly like that, the more they'll use you. Meaning, the more time you'll spend in the suit, the less time Val will spend in the suit, which probably made Val pretty happy.
We're using a combination of computer technology, miniature photography, and just about every kind of technique that's available to special effects artists to create the visuals for this film.
Batman Forever came at a time when we were just at the beginning of the digital revolution. And that made it okay for me to say, now we can use this digital medium to work on this movie. But there were still limitations to creating objects and certainly to creating characters. What the digital realm eventually allowed us to do was become much more filmmakers and much less engineers.
The city of Gotham doesn't really exist, and as a result, rather than try to build a real city or dress a real city, we're going to build our city in miniature. The design of these shots begins with the description that is in the script, proceeds through that through illustrations and designs via the production designer and storyboards that are drawn in conjunction with the director to create the moves and the scenes that are necessary to tell the story.
There's a standard line, and it's in every script that is a visual effects script, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And it pops up all the time. So it's like, okay, they come to a cliff edge. They look over, and there's the city below, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And that is generic. The script is a living document, so even though you put an enormous amount of energy and preparation into one version of the scene, you have to be prepared for, on a moment's notice, the scene changing significantly. It's like spinning plates in the air.
Look up! That's a cut!
Joel was very open to collaboration, which is great, which means that lots of people from within the company would talk about a given sequence. And you had to have communication because there was a determination being made by the producer as to whether something would be visual effects or whether we would do it practical or whether it would be mechanical effects or stunts.
You know, you're creating your own world. You're creating your own Gotham City, so everything has to be invented. And even though we went onto the streets of New York and used it for Gotham City, we had to reinvent the streets of New York to be ours so that they're lit and the architecture and everything about them has the flavor of the rest of the film.
I was pleased with the city. I thought it looked terrific. I thought the miniatures were really successful. It was pretty exciting and fun. I was quite pleased. This is the last big miniature movie that I've done. Miniatures are kind of going away. They're not going away, but they're slowly being bit by bit replaced by computer-generated imagery.
Replicate the animatic that was created in a computer. The background buildings that you see here are mathematical models of real buildings that we're using on the set. The helicopter is a mathematical model of the helicopter that we're actually going to photograph as a miniature, and the composite of the two was done in a computer to the length and to the choreography of the shot that we want to put in the film. So what will happen is Eric and the people here will take and match the move on this background. We can switch across to the buildings, and you can see these buildings have pretty much the same move that you saw in the computer-generated image. As you can see, we've begun to match up the move of the computer-generated animatic, which is sort of our template for the shot, with the real buildings photographed on a stage using a motion control camera. And of course, we're still using the computer-generated helicopter as a placeholder for the miniature of the helicopter that we'll eventually shoot.
This will fix him.
in terms of the Batman character being agile and doing superhuman things, and that you can work on forever and never get right. You will always find improvement in how the character animates and how you create the sense of physics in that character's world. It's tough, because if a man jumps off a 30-story building, he will end up a small pile of bone and blood. However, Batman leaps off a 30-story building and he survives it. And not only survives it, he survives it with panache. When I do work with principals, usually the principal's already coming to you saying, okay, what is it that's going on here? And exactly what am I seeing? And then you have to be able to tell them in words, describe for them an image that has dimension, that they can relate to, because they have to relate to it in the scene that they're doing. They will be pleased to do it as long as it doesn't look like you're trying to cover yourself. In other words, they'll do as many takes as you want if they understand that they've got to get a good take and get the timing right. But if you just keep doing takes and don't explain to them why it is you're asking for another take, they get unhappy with it. So you have to communicate constantly with them. You have to be vulnerable to them. You have to say, here's what I'd like you to do and here's why I'd like you to do it, and let them go, I don't think that's what he'd do. And then you go, okay, fine. And you can argue it or not. But, it's the same relationship you have with anybody else that you're sharing a creative process with. It's an embarrassment of riches, because you can do anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do anything. Now the onus is on us as visual effects designers and on filmmakers to use this very powerful tool in a way that is evocative rather than just spectacular.
I think the one unique thing that separates him from a lot of superheroes is that he's a man. He's not a super force from another planet. Green lasers don't shoot out of his fingers.
And he's traumatized from his youth, and it's certainly a fundamental fear you're going to lose your parents. He's raised by someone else. He's lonely and angry, and there's a goodness in him. He wants to right wrongs.
And he has all the vulnerabilities and all of the flaws and all of the human drama that any human being has. He's not perfect, and he's not impenetrable. He's a man, not a Superman.
It's a perfect character. It's a perfect story.
I wanted to add mythic qualities to our story of Batman. And so there was a struggle for Bruce Wayne to find his identity insofar as why he ever became Batman, to look back in his past as a child and the events that happened to him and why he became Batman. He has a choice as a man now whether to continue to be Batman or not.
Was to me a much more mysterious and romantic and coolly aloof Bruce Wayne. Very different than Michael Keaton. Although they're Batmans, in the costume with the voice doing the stunts was pretty much the same.
You look at Val Kilmer and you think, what the hell's that guy thinking? Because certain actors have that thing where you look at them and you know the wheels are turning in there.
Val Kilmer felt more haunted but heroic.
Well, also, Val Kilmer, he's rich.
Yeah.
He walked into a room, he realized this guy's a billionaire, and people are attracted to him.
Yeah, he was comfortable with his wealth, where Michael Keaton's interpretation was he was never comfortable in his own skin, right, and never comfortable with all of this stuff, which had basically come from his parents.
Right.
The things that are most fantastical about Bruce Wayne have to do with basic American dream ideals. He's disgustingly wealthy. He's so wealthy it never comes up. What he chooses to do with his free time is fight an impossible battle against the crime of a city that's corrupt. It's very wild, very radical, very political.
This is a guy who can't just take off the mask and the cape
and put it away. It's going to creep into his everyday life. It's going to be causing repercussions in his everyday life. And we wanted to explore those.
It's a classic character now, and people are still enthralled with it. It's kind of become, especially with Val stepping into the shoes now, it becomes even more classic because you have Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, and then who knows who else who will play the role. So it seems to be almost like a James Bond, but a different kind.
Batman's all about doing and action and these incidental things that come up where he's got to stop and talk to people. You'd rather not. And I like those scenes a lot. He likes Chase, but why'd you call me here? And just wants to go. It's a really good screenplay.
The sadness is that this man who can never be healed.
Right.
If he was, it would be a terrible thing for the city.
It would be a loss for the city if he was healed. So he sort of needs to maintain his psychological problems for the sake of everybody else. And I think deep down he has to know that.
About 11 months after the first story was published in 1940, Robin was introduced, the first of the kid sidekicks ever.
Over the years, over the decades, the legend has been that of Batman and Robin. And I think no matter how they're portrayed in the movies or the comics, from time to time Batman will be alone, from time to time they'll be together, but I think there's no way they'll ever permanently be separated out. And in the comics, in fact, there have now been several Robins who have been created to fill the role.
What that allows you to do is to sort of get to Nightwing, who is the adult Robin character. And in fact, that is the costume that Chris wears in the movie.
I was fascinated doing the movie just to kind of see what the story is like. Where did Robin come from?
So what we did was we went back to the comic books and just started reading every version of Robin's origin story to say, you know what, let's at least honor the history that already exists.
The legend of Dick Grayson in Batman comics is that he and his family, they are traveling acrobats with a circus. I brought in Dick Grayson, who becomes Robin, because his family has also been killed by a criminal. And he's a mirror of what happened to Bruce Wayne when he was younger, so he gets to relive that through another person.
His parents die, and he's consumed with revenge. He can't think about anything else.
There's fun to this truth that we find one way or another situations that force us to work through those things we haven't worked through from our own life.
I think Chris O'Donnell did a great job as Robin. He brought believability to the character. If the character in the movie had been 12 years old, as he was in the comic books when he started out, the believability factor, that suspension of disbelief, would have been strained really, I think, to the edge. But Chris, doing it the way he did at his age, was able to scale that and make it work.
I was excited that I was in the right place at the right time. I suppose if they had done Robin in the first one, it wouldn't have been me, and I wouldn't have been a part of it.
She's a criminal psychologist. She's just moved to Gotham City, and that's how she first encounters Batman, and he knocks her off her feet. I mean, she's sort of attracted to the dark side of life, so Batman is very attractive to her. Bruce Wayne is interested in her, so therefore there's a love triangle between two people, obviously.
Chase is fun. She's smart as Bruce, sexy as Bruce.
I said, it's not going to be believable. I mean, she's a psychologist. You just don't dress like this as a psychologist. Joel says, Nicole, this is a comic book. We throw logic out the window. It is heightened reality. And then as soon as he said that to me, I understood, and we went with it. And it was the red lipstick, the perfect hair, the deep, gravelly voice. But when you got that blonde hair, you got to have a deep voice.
She's got a very straight job. She works inside the police headquarters. But as soon as she meets Batman, she's flagging him down off of a local rooftop.
You know, we've never seen in a Batman movie anybody use the bat signal except Commissioner Gordon. So one has to admire the determination of such a beautiful young woman that she would just turn on the bat light so she could meet Batman.
Finally, her arc is, where she starts to explore her relationship with Bruce as well as her relationship with Batman, which are both completely different, even though it's the same person.
The Riddler's origin and his personality, to a degree, always seems to change from every interpretation. He basically is Edward Nygma from the comic books on to the movies and animation, but they've always done a little bit of tweaking here and there to kind of make the character a little more current or give him more of a connection to Batman. The casting of Jim Carrey as the Riddler after his performance in The Mask and a lot of stuff he had been doing on In Living Color, he could really become that kind of rubber-bodied character wearing the spandex, running around with the question marks all over him.
Jim Carrey's performance as the Riddler was truly one of the great performances I've seen of a comic book villain. I think he took the elements of the comic book. There was what Frank Gorshin had brilliantly done in the TV series and made something really quite unique out of it.
That's not gonna be good for me. I need an answer now. I think I deserve it. I'm sorry, Ed, then the answer is no.
We had the license to basically decide for the first time how the Riddler became the Riddler. So that was like this privilege, like, oh, nobody else has done this. We get to define it.
I thought the idea that he was somebody who worked for Bruce Wayne, yet was vastly unappreciated and held back, not necessarily by Wayne himself, but by the corporate system, was a very interesting way to go.
He's quite brilliant in his field. He ends up getting fired, and so it's kind of revenge, but he also has a desire for Bruce Wayne's approval, and it kind of drives him a little crazy.
You were supposed to understand.
You see in Jim's eyes, you see the change, the flip over. Okay, I love this man, now I hate him. I'm now your enemy.
I'll make you understand.
And it's a beautifully played moment by Jim. Just
He
beautiful.
nailed it. Exactly as we imagined it.
Yeah.
He's a sycophant, you know, he's like this stalker almost. And he's completely obsessed with Bruce Wayne. He loves the guy, you know, / hates him. It's about seeing somebody who is the guy that you'd love to be and resenting him for it, you know, and that's how it basically, you know, snowballs into this sick fantasy.
This is your brain on the box. This is my brain on the box. Does anybody else feel like a fried egg?
So he's sucking Gotham's brainwaves. He's devouring people's IQ. And so he just becomes a mega intellect, although he's mad, you know. So, I mean, intellect with madness is kind of a fun combination.
Like the jacket? It keeps me safe when I'm jogging at night.
He's not a very physical guy, except for he's very flamboyant. He's got a little touch of Fred Astaire, a panache, joie de vivre. But he's not going to hurt anybody with his fists, but he'll pick up a rock. That's where you have to be careful. It's just a great character because it just takes on different forms, and he gets so full of energy and evil power that, you know, you just can't help but love playing that. It's just amazing.
He rehearses and practices harder than anybody I've ever known. And when he comes to do the scene, it's all spontaneous, but within parameters that he's really worked out. His facial expressions, his body movements, how he uses the cane, how he uses his face. He's extraordinarily professional.
You know, it's not who has the answers, it's who knows the questions.
Harvey Dent was his name before he fell into villainy, and he was a district attorney in Gotham. And he actually had a rather good working relationship with the Batman.
And when Boss Maroni, who is the sort of, you know, mafia don of Gotham City, threw acid in Harvey Dent's face and turned him into a psychotic, schizophrenic, he became a criminal.
He is a torn and interesting character because he was once a friend of Bruce Wayne's and was once a crusading district attorney and had so much good in him that to see him horribly scarred and really driven insane really brings a whole layer to his character development.
It's someone who has a close connection with Bruce Wayne and someone who, based on the fact that he wants to see justice done in Gotham City, will allow Batman, you know, kind of a blind eye to operate. And then when he's scarred, it's like, you know, this bitter payback, you know, like I allowed you to operate in the city, I looked the other way, and now look what's happened to me as a result of this. Okay, now I'm your worst nightmare.
Became everything that he shouldn't have been. And ultimately, Batman could have went down that road too. It could have went to the excessive vigilante side, where he became just as bad as the criminals he fought. But he chose to hold himself back. Harvey did not.
Nothing better than live bait to trap a bat.
There's the wild card aspect of Two-Face, the flipping of the coin to decide whether or not he's going to do good or evil. That's something else that's wildly divergent, and it's a wonderful plot tool for characters in storytelling, because you don't know how the coin flip is going to turn out and how it's going to affect how the story is being told.
I was a great fan of the comic book as a child. Harvey Two-Face appeared in 1943. I was born in 46. In the sort of narrowly specialized area of Harvey Two-Face, I became a Bob Kane scholar and spoke to Bob about Harvey's background and did a good deal of research. Of course, Harvey is all about duality, you know. Having said that, we now have a firm grasp of the obvious, and that's really all that's required.